If you can drink a glass of milk without your stomach turning on you, you're not the default human. You're the exception, the mutation. Right now, something like 65% of adults on this planet can't properly digest milk. Not because something's wrong with them, because that's actually the normal ancestral human condition. The ability to drink milk as an adult, painlessly, is the weird one. Here's the part that gets stranger the more you look at it. Every mammal on Earth, humans included, is built to digest milk as a baby and then stop. Lactase, the enzyme that breaks down milk sugar, normally shuts off after weaning. That's not a flaw, that's just how mammals work. You drink your mother's milk, you grow, your body moves on to solid food, and the machinery for milk digestion quietly powers down. Except in some of us, it never powers down at all. For a long time, nobody really knew why or when that switch got flipped for some populations and not others. So researchers went looking, not just at living people's genes, at ancient DNA pulled straight out of skeletons thousands of years old. And what they found was oddly specific. There's a single genetic change, one tiny variant sitting near the lactase gene, that's responsible for most lactase persistence in European populations. Researchers traced its origin to somewhere between the Central Balkans and Central Europe, and they were able to pin down roughly when it started spreading, about 7,500 years ago, which is not some vague ancient time frame. That's a specific window tied to a specific group of early farmers. Here's where it gets interesting. This mutation shows up right around the same time people in that region started keeping dairy animals: sheep, goats, cattle. For the first time, adult humans had regular access to fresh milk, something evolution had never really needed to plan for before. And the people who happened to carry a mutation letting them digest that milk without pain had a real advantage. That's not a small edge. In evolutionary terms, that's the kind of advantage that spreads through a population fast. And it did. This is actually considered one of the strongest, best documented examples of recent human natural selection ever found. Not something that happened over 100,000 years. Something that happened in what is, evolutionarily speaking, basically yesterday. But here's a detail that should stop you. Remember Ötzi, the 5,300-year-old mummy we've talked about before, found frozen in the Alps, covered in those tattoos? Researchers tested his DNA for this exact mutation. He didn't have it, which means even 2,000 years after this trait started spreading, one of the most well-studied ancient humans we've ever found still couldn't drink milk as an adult without getting sick. The mutation existed, it just hadn't reached him yet. Ancient DNA studies across hundreds of Neolithic and Bronze Age skeletons back this up. The gene stayed rare for thousands of years after it first appeared, only really taking off in the last 3,500 years or so. Now here's the detail that genuinely surprised researchers. Europe wasn't the only place this happened. At least 5 different populations around the world independently evolved their own versions of lactase persistence. Groups in East Africa, the Middle East, different mutations, different genetic locations, same basic solution, arrived at separately by people who had zero knowledge of each other's existence. Sound familiar? It's the exact same pattern we've seen with other ancient technology. Different groups, isolated from each other, running into the same problem and landing on strikingly similar answers, completely independently. In this case, the problem wasn't a weapon, it was food security, and the answer wasn't a tool. It was written directly into people's genes. I want to be honest about something here though, because it's easy to walk away from this thinking humanity solved milk digestion. It didn't. Most of the world's population still carries the ancestral, non-persistent version of this gene. Lactose intolerance isn't a disorder, it's not a deficiency, it's just the original setting. The mutation is real, it's powerful, and it's spread fast in populations that relied heavily on dairy. But it never became universal because it was never universally useful. In places without a long history of drinking animal milk, there was no advantage to select for, so the ancestral version simply stayed exactly where it always was. So if you can finish a glass of milk right now without a second thought, that's not a neutral, unremarkable fact about your body. That's the end result of a specific mutation in a specific region roughly 7,500 years ago that happened to catch on hard enough to still be riding through your DNA today. So here's my question. If your ancestors hadn't caught that mutation, if you were still running on the default setting every mammal is born with, do you think you'd have given up milk or pushed through the discomfort anyway? Let me know in the comments. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon.